Good morning, channel friends.
Hello.
I called Alex today because I involved him and Alessandra into a really cool project that I've been thinking about for a while. Honestly, I can't take much credit because it wasn't my idea, but actually my sister's. My sister is the head nurse, that is, the organizer of a geriatrics department at the hospital here in Corn, and for a while now, for more than a year, she has been telling me, Elisa, we should do something nice, something beautiful to make my department more beautiful, airy, and sunnier, because unfortunately in hospitals people are unwell, and when there are these dull walls simply painted in soft colors, it's not that cheerful, is it? And for those who work there every day, it is not pleasant. Thanks to the facility director, Dr. Gobi, we decided to set up this wonderful project.
This art attack.
Yes, because it is a project we are starting, but who knows if other hospitals may do it in the future. Obviously, they won't have Alex, Alessandro, Elisa, and Emma. This will be special. We hope so because it is a great project. It is a great project especially because in the geriatrics department where we are carrying out this project, there are people who often have issues due to cognitive impairment. What does it mean? It means that they sometimes struggle to recognize the environments because they are used to their home, their comforts, and their habits. Once we take them to an environment that is unfamiliar to them, they struggle to adapt. So we decided to create 9 paintings, which are 9 different projects. Look at his face. He is not doing all 9 of them himself. He and Alessandra have split the difficulty between them. We are depicting 9 different monuments on these panels, which are specifically 30 by 60 because they need to fit in a certain place on the doors of the rooms that depict these monuments, which are both European and non-European. They played smart, as they chose the ones they preferred among themselves, but that's fair enough.
No, we divided them. We talked and we sorted them out.
You said I want this, you want that, take this and that.
The Shadow Master also took the ones she had chosen herself.
These monuments were chosen not by me, but indeed by Dr. Claudia and Donatella, my sister, and it was they who chose this subject, so it's not my doing. But I have made myself completely available to carry out this project because it gives me great pleasure, and they preferred monuments from capitals because they are recognizable and therefore easier to remember.
It's an illustrative commission in magic paint style, so it's fantastic.
So, today Alex will show you the process of creating a painting of this kind, where there is a real illustration, because these are not fantasy things. It's not a fantasy face as you often see from Alex. So these are monuments that everyone knows, and it's more difficult because it's harder to be consistent with something that everyone knows compared to a fictional face, okay? And he will show you from A to Z how to create a painting. We have chosen a very simple plywood board, 1/2 centimeter thick. Don't miss any steps. He will create 5. He will show you 5, but you will see 2 subjects in detail. Otherwise, we will stay here forever.
Yes, there are 2 different styles, so we can see 3 done in one style and 2 done in another, so that our people at home can maybe try to replicate it.
So we combine the usefulness of this project, and also its beauty because we are decorating the entire department.
My sister will be happy and will love me more. Jokes aside, it's a project that I believe will make a difference. Should we start? Let's go.
We began our process by selecting the subjects that were specifically chosen by Dr. Claudia and Donatella to carry out this particular project. We have already painted the boards with a coat of clear sand. Is it okay?
Perfect.
I didn't choose Soffio as I'm not into white optic.
We will use it at the end. It's better to have a burnt color.
To add the lights.
Clear but burnt.
So, we already have these sheets that you printed out and you came here with all the sheets connected.
Yes. Actually, Emma helped me. But let's pretend nothing happened.
Emma is better than me.
It's not true.
Joking aside, he arrived early this morning and started doing this. You can explain better than I can.
This is what we see in the videos. Basically, This is the graphite behind it, or use graphite paper sheets. Why didn't I use the graphite paper sheets?
Because we forgot them. So always remember that, as Alex teaches in the tutorials, you can do this with graphite paper by placing it here and drawing on the tablet, or with the thick pencil to make it easier.
He took one of my children's pencils, and that's why today is like this. Why did you make this outline for no reason?
Because I only did the most important part of the front. I will show you.
Yes, flip it. So he simply did this. He used the mine over the entire outline that is to be mirrored on the board.
The clouds were extra detail anyway, so we only did it on the main detail I needed to transfer onto the wood.
Okay, understood. Guys, so right now he used the pencil to transfer the details onto the tablet. It's a very simple thing. Don't go making a big deal out of it.
I'll trace the line to guide me, like I do at my courses.
We did it for these two projects that we are going to see, which are the Tower of Pisa and the Statue of Liberty. We chose something Italian to be patriotic and something American.
Okay, it's true.
Because, you know, the video is also translated into English, so people will watch it in America, in England, in Spain, and so on.
Are we also trending for doing these things abroad? Do you think that?
So, I will step away. I won't steal Alex's spotlight. I can't. It's impossible.
Oh, stop it.
But you have to remember that they are used to me saying everything in the tutorials. Why I hold the brush that way, why I take the pen and not the pencil, and why I do what I do, so you need to be as talkative as me.
So we are actually doing a course. These people will get a free course at home.
Yes, but let's be honest, I've already seen you working. I haven't started doing it yet, so the course is never enough. It needs to be done in person, which is always better. I'll leave you with Alex and go do something else.
So, these boards are multi-layered, the 4mm ones. They are made of wood. The first coat is magic paint because this way the color can set, and I can also paint very well. When you work on wood, it can be a bit more complicated. These sheets, on the other hand, have already been made with a graphics program. You can go to your photographer and have them made to measure, and they have already been printed, divided obviously into 3 sheets of 3, to the size of my plywood, so they are 30 by 60. Now I position this on, I place it like this. I give it a bit of space. I hold it here with some masking tape, fix it and go over the entire part on the photocopy with a pen. The nice thing is that if you already have a good drawing and it is well done, and it is the right size for what you need, you can take the main lines and make sure that what you see on top is then transferred below because there is graphite behind it or a sheet of graphite paper. Let's begin. I cut the bottom part so I can secure it with tape. Here it is. So, the sheet must always be very steady, even with the images you like and want to transfer. Here I now set a length for myself which is about 1.5 to 2 centimeters at the top, so that I can keep the title and it will have its importance. This way the sheet doesn't move. I make this movement so at least I can keep it steady and put another piece of tape. Okay, the other important step is to test if the graphite at the back actually works, if my graphite sheet works. So I start from this part here. The movement to make is a bit back and forth, like when that old aunt calls on the phone and you don't want to talk to her, and you start doodling. This is what I always explain in the courses. You'll have to sit here and basically go over the outlines of your, in this case, letter. I'll flip it, see? The part stays exactly here. It's not perfect, but it's a base and it's what I need to paint and do what I need to do. Now I'll sit here and go over the entire drawing completely. I will try to capture all the main details, attempting to divide it into lines. And you will tell me, this drawing is very complicated. It includes all the parts of the trees. Many things we will capture at the line level, many things we will capture at the brushstroke level. So, if you remember the video about hydrangeas, we will be doing many steps related to the brushstroke that will simulate leaves and clouds, and I will explain all the various techniques to you. So, take notes. Now let's lift. I would say we're there. That's what I need. I remove the sheet. I will need later for painting and seeing all the colors. If you look, you can see the lines of my drawing and also the writing. Now we have transferred the graphite onto the support. We keep our photocopy here because we need it to copy the colors, shadows, and lines. I got some Nuit Parisienne, a color from the Magic Paint range, the darkest one that there is. But it is very beautiful because it's a burnt color. It's very warm. I have, as you can see, put it in a small glass with a bit of water and, in this way, it is used to make very, very long lines without causing the color to break. Now I'll show you. I take the paint, dip the brush, which is from the line that Elisa made for me, the ones with the black handle, and I go on to create lines while keeping the skin attached to the support. So in this way, by rubbing and trying to pull back with the elbow, I manage to keep the lines always very straight. Generally, the mistake that is always made when doing something like this is using the wrist this way. The wrist in this manner creates lines that break a bit, which are, let's say, not very nice. Instead, I have already given you a great tip, which is to always draw the line from top to bottom and to create continuity. For this type of technique, I will use a very watercolor-like effect, so these lines will be visible and will form my construction, somewhat like a pencil line but fixed, which does not get ruined or lost with water when using other colors. All magic paint colors, once applied to the surface used for painting or illustration, no longer mix with water, so you always need to think beforehand about the parts where the water will break or where it will be blended. Once dry, we are sure it won't come off anymore, and this is very positive because we can, as you said, achieve these quick lines that almost look like they were done with a pencil. By using a tip of this type with a good brush and good bristles, we can achieve these effects that almost look calligraphic. It doesn't even look like brush color. Now we have made these lines, like this, which almost look like ink. I take a spray bottle, spray the whole part that is now nice and dry. Even with water, this part here will not get damaged. This surface is now all very wet. Perfect. With the color, I am going to create areas like in my main image. For this step, I will use Vivre, Torta di Zucca, Vintage, Venere, Pepper Blue, and finally Soffio, which is the pure white from Magic Paint. So I simply take a bit of color and spread it around like this. I also use water to help me and apply it as if it were really a watercolor stain. Just remember that you need very little color since it's extremely pigmented, so you need to be sure that the color is always well spread on an already watery surface. If you want to have these watercolor effects here and add this movement, you can also create effects by dabbing. Once dry, it will really look like genuine watercolored and hammered paper. I am taking a large brush for this job because I need to distribute it unevenly. So I need to create spots with more pigment and spots with less pigment. I always refer to my photocopy because it is the main image, more or less indicating where the percentage of pigment is, so I roughly copy those areas and translate them into spots. I then spread this color around, as you can see, rather quickly, without continuing to brush in the same spot because that is a common issue in courses, and the color ends up depositing evenly. Instead, I need to create these spots. So I take a bit of Venere, which is this pinkish gray, and use it to create this part here where the clouds are slightly tinged with pink. So I simply go on to create areas just like this, without going too crazy, where this color creates a background that is always watercolor-like. So, since we are working with water, if I dry the brush, it becomes an eraser. so it helps me to remove any excess color where I don't need it. Always remember that the color of the sky and other things will be reflected on every surface, so I bring a little bit here, a little bit there, even on my structure. Just a little, but it will be there. Also for Venere, which is this color here, it will be placed in this part. So I will slightly fill in the left part. Now I dry with the hairdryer. Now I dip the brush in water, and I take some color. Always remember, if you have the palette, spray a bit of water to prevent the color from drying out. And then I fill in my drawing with a fine-tipped brush, creating a base that is always very rich in water, so practically a transparent base, but always in the color I need. With the tip of the brush, I go into the corners, trying to go almost everywhere. This is needed to create the first base on which I will add all the shades. Now I take the vintage, which is this brown, very beautiful, and I go to fill the bottom part. I'm not going to fill it with the same shade of vintage everywhere, because yes, I need to color it, but the left part of my drawing will be a bit lighter. So, to give it depth, I will paint this part here with vintage. And this part here will be a bit lighter, still maybe with the same color, but I'll add a bit of veneer. The brush strokes are always circular because they allow the color to create these little circles, as if it were real watercolor paper. If I only had a vertical or horizontal movement, I would create scratches on the surface with the color, and it would look ugly and uneven. Moreover, if the color underneath smudges the color on top, it actually looks very nice, so don't worry. Using the brush in this way creates a deposit of color that simulates a different stroke from before, so it looks like leaves. I use it as if it were a bit spongy, pressing a bit on the surface in this way. Even with water. I put a bit there as well because there are some leaves there and it's fine. Now the trick is to drain the brush, keep it very wet, and the same color will definitely be reflected on the statue, so bring it a little bit in these areas here. This will create a lot of uniformity and provide an extra boost to your illustration, especially in these parts here, where you have another color and it seems to you that you are doing something wrong. Actually, we are carrying around lights that are being reflected on the surface. With the same pointed brush, this round one, I just dip it in water, take a bit of pigment, which is this Vivre, and look at my photocopy to see where the shadows are. Then I simply go ahead and copy the shadows onto my painting. In this way, the color is more toned, and we manage to have a range of darks that is not the final one, but already provides an idea of three-dimensionality. So I need to be careful not to distort the idea I have of the photocopy and try to create a fairly realistic effect. Always remember that the shadows, in this style of watercolor, which seems quite sketchy, should be something done very gesturally, very quickly, somewhat imprecisely, but with a decisive brushstroke. It should give the impression of being done somewhat randomly, but a well-done kind of random. Precision in these cases is somewhat our enemy. We need to try to create something that looks very chaotic, but actually only captures all the dark parts. I'm going to use the same color on the same parts of my photocopy, but I need to spread it around a bit. If I use a bit of color there, following the idea I mentioned earlier, I need to try to bring it a bit here and a bit there. You can't see it, but I assure you that a little bit of that color is there. So, I simply spread it a bit here and there, a very low percentage, so with a slightly lighter wash, and maybe in the area of the steps I will add a bit more of this blue. This will help to avoid creating something flat. The work will be much more contemporary and will have the feel of something almost painted en plein air. Now, we create more detail always with the vintage. We don't use a lighter color, and then I'll explain you why. We use a brush, the flat one from the collection that was made for me, number 7. The flat brush, if used in this way, creates very fine lines. So here I copy the tree exactly as it is, recreating these areas of branches based on the thickness and how much I press the brush. I can keep the lines more or less fine. So with the same brush, I can really create different thicknesses. Additionally, in the lower part, as in the photocopy, I need to try to add some slightly darker shadows. So, still using the same brush as before that I used to make thin lines, creating the previous brush stroke, the one that is a bit more, let's say, sponged, a bit more like this, I get, let's say, the lower part of the plant, the part that is a bit more in shadow. This will give a lot of volume to my plant and the drawing. I am going to use the same color to intensify some parts again. So you see, the brush can be held in one way or another, in such a way that it fills in the various points, creates lines, and above all, I also use it a bit for my idea of bringing colors around in the part of the Statue of Liberty. So, to avoid it being too much of a solid blue, I'm going to add a bit of my brown. I spread it all over. I measure it out carefully. Maybe I watercolor it and try to ensure that the whole image is very warm and harmonious. I take a bit of pepper blue and try to create the shadow in this position, so I quickly try to darken the entire area that is in shadow in my photocopy. This will create more relief and depth. Always remember that the paint must be very, very diluted, and we need to try to apply it only in the right area without creating overly covering zones. This layering of many colors is an excellent solution to create numerous shades all in palette. In fact, with watercoloring, you can create many shades that will form a pleasant optical effect together. I am now applying the blue to the Statue of Liberty, and I am practically recreating the shadows that I already see in my photocopy, trying to achieve an almost final shadow. Let's remember that underneath we have blue, we have brown, we have many shades, so we don't need to cover them completely. We need to try to balance this blue to really achieve the deepest shadow.
Go ahead, I won't scare you.
No, but do you know what I'm going to do now? Something you really like, even when I go to the courses, the builder's finger on the brush. I take a bit of paint. The brush is wet with water.
Do we care that the paint has dried on the plate?
No, because I always put some water on top to prevent it from becoming dry.
I ask these silly questions because I've just arrived, but I'm amazed at how real and true the colours are compared to the original image. It's amazing. You're very talented.
Thank you. It's just the beginning.
Listen, let me see.
I do it like this. I give some touches with the brush, creating these droplets. A watercoloured moscatura. And I spread this around a bit because it creates this texture that spreads when wet, which I always really like, and when dry, it stays as a droplet. When it's wet here, I get more colour, so I create this effect that will expand as it dries. I'll need it later with the lighter colours. It will give me a nice background.
Listen, but we think from home that only you, who have mastery of the brush because you use it daily for everything you do, can achieve this.
For me, the doubt always arises at this point, because I wonder, will I be able to understand when all the various layers of paint are dry and it's the right moment to do what you just did with the watercolouring? I mean, how long will it take for me to realize this?
So, I always say that the best teacher is the mistake. In the end, if you make a drop on a dry surface, it remains well-defined, but if it is on a wet surface, it spreads out. The same goes for metallics.
I'm learning what I should and shouldn't do.
Exactly.
So the advice we always give is this: if you don't make mistakes, you can't learn. Sometimes I or he might make a mistake on your behalf and we already tell you not to do something, otherwise you'll make a mess. But sometimes you have to try. So far, it might have seemed easy or difficult depending a bit on your life experience, but you have to try. If you don't try, you won't understand. We'll give you another trick since we are here. This is a cloth, a dry rag. I'm going to remove the part one don't need from my illustration. So guys, there's always a way to go back if you flooded too much, flooded too little, or if you don't like it, meaning you can also correct it.
Always. When it is dry, maybe.
Anyway, he is close to the image, and even if it seems to you that he is flooding everything, it is absolutely not the case, because if you look under the plate, he has perfectly respected the clouds, so the blue parts, the light parts, the parts where there are no clouds, are perfectly identical. So yes, I repeat it, the most important thing after watching this tutorial is to immediately get back on a wooden board that you have, the first one you find, and start practicing. Try on any type of subject, but you must try. I'm off.
Thank you. Now I've taken a bit of Soffio, the white, and my spray bottle. After I've dried the board, I go to spray again, creating these micro drops, a very, very humid environment. With the white I create my clouds. Why do I spray water? Because I don't want this white to be too strong. I really want it to blend well, and I'm actually trying to more or less follow the print. It's not completely white on the left, you see, so I need to create areas that work and are more or less strong. I always help myself with a cloth or with a paper towel, and this will help me remove the excessive white. Besides removing, this also blends the color very, very well. Same as before, I take the brush a bit dipped in water with some white and give a few strokes around. This is a bit like my signature. I like it, and above all, it simulates a starry sky. These parts here are never done on the main subject, but are made somewhat like a background, as something that adds an extra texture to my entire illustration. I add a bit of white, as I always work with the same colors, but at the same time I add a bit of Torta di Zucca and a light touch of vintage. This color is perfectly in palette. It remains light. I unload the brush well. You see, it doesn't have to be perfectly mixed, but this should come out, and I try to open the bristle like this. Okay, the brush stays like this. I use this to create the first part of, let's call them leaves, even though they are not really leaves. It's as if it's something that slightly tones down my branches. With a 12-pointed brush, I go to create. I add a little white. I do yet another palette, staying in color, so always a color with white. I go to create areas by tapping, simulating more or less the leaf. The trick is to practically create marks with the brush that each remind me of something. I haven't used this dotted technique yet that goes to the right and to the left in other directions. You need to be patient. With a small cloth, I always go to detonalize these dots that I have made. In this way, they will be a little less intense. They will mix a bit, and I will have created this effect that blends together more. Now that I've done this step, I go back to my Torta di Zucca, add a bit of vintage, then I get this brown-orange and I go on to create these areas of the leaves. In the same way as before, I go on to make brush strokes thinking about the very essence of the leaf. Always remember to occasionally create some thicker areas because the leaves condense in certain spots and then become a bit freer. So always create a zone of dabbing where the color intensifies and then spreads out. Now with my previous black color that was used for the very beginning, I am going to create the final lines where there was the most shadow. So here I need to focus not on making the outlines, but on finding where the most shadow was possible. So I am going to create the final step, which doesn't need to be everywhere, but should give a finished and complete feeling to the drawing. Here I have some details and I will add them. Now I just try to refine the part, let's say where I don't have to do much, just a bit more, basically just the shadow. So I am going to intensify the very, very shaded area. I dip the brush in water and in my white paint, ensuring it is not pure white, and I proceed to create practically the final part of the lights. This step involves bringing out all the parts that theoretically are in bright light. Remember that the Soffio is not a covering white, so the beauty of this color is that it creates lights where I want them and go over it several times. In this way, all the areas where there is naturally light will be amplified. All the areas that have a bit of brightness, I bring out with these quick brush strokes. The same technique, however, must also be replicated on my monument base, so I go where I see the part under the light to recreate these areas. White, let's say, is the final phase, the one that finishes all the work because it lightens and allows the details that only come out at this moment to be seen. I also use it for the steps to give just a touch here and there. And then with a pointed brush, which is this one, I intensify the areas with white again. So, another step where I simply add more white with a bit of water. I always help myself with a cloth here, especially because I know I will have the writing and I go to remove the excess paint. With the pepper blue, I am now going to fill in the writing, so with a lot of patience I will simply recreate my writing. In my case, for my style, I don't care if the writing isn't perfect because I like something that looks like it has been hand-painted with a brush. I always help myself first with a pencil to draw it because at least I have well-defined outlines.
Alex, I love it. It is very realistic compared to the photo. I like it.
So, I created this watercolor effect, went over the lines, and now with our satin protective paint, the Marron Glacé, we are going to create another effect. Generally, I always use satin protective everywhere.
This is diluted, and I mention it only because at home you will surely ask in the questions. Diluted 10%. Yes, a little. Obviously, the base must be so dry that the protective layer should not move any possible colors. So before doing this, remember that the base must be completely dry. Secondly, also remember that this process needs to be a bit quick. You see, he doesn't think too much about it. He takes it, spreads it, now he's smoothing it out, as you can see, to give it a nice uniformity, so there are no marks, but it took him less than a minute. You can't take too long, otherwise you'll end up wetting the underlying colors and moving them.
Absolutely, always.
And now?
The trick, the one I like, take a drop of Marron Glacé. We can't do the opposite. From here now we unload the brush. I have my photocopy here. With the dirty brush I will create a sort of antiquing effect on the brown parts.
It almost looks like an old photo, slightly yellowed by time.
Yes, I always like to add a bit of this Marron Glacé because it gives a lot of depth to my work. You shouldn't overdo it because it's something that is only meant to be applied to the edges. If you overdo it, you can remove it with a cloth, and I also use it to color certain areas.
So, since you wanted to achieve this aqua green and you really like the light brown on the blues, it creates a bit of that vignette effect of old photos, where there is a central focus and the contrasting part with the dream, with what was and what has been. I really like it. It almost looks like an old photo of the Statue of Liberty in autumn, when the trees lose their leaves. Beautiful. I like it.
Now I apply the Marron Glacé here below, always spreading it a bit like this. I am going to create this yellow which will give even more depth, not on the white.
And the leaves are more realistic. Alex, we really like this first draft.
Thank you.
Because you have to do 2 more.
Yes, same style.
So, if they want to see the other 2 monuments in this style and also want to see the other technique that you propose for the other monuments, they need to pay attention and come back next Thursday for our tutorial.
There will be another video with a different technique, much more painterly, much more textured, less watery, and it will be a great surprise.
So they can't say they've seen this and seen everything because it's not like that. Next week you will see another tutorial with another technique, but at the end of the tutorial there will be a summary of all 5 monuments created by Alex. So if you want to see the end of this project done with him, you have to watch the next tutorial.
Shall we say goodbye to them?
Bye everyone.